what it takes to run a campaign today? If you guys were running again right now, with that kind of fragmented kind of the way folks are kind of getting it, what would you do, or how would you kind of go about thinking about it differently, knowing that people are kind of getting what they want, right? It's the classic, I'm not going to hear something that is opposed to what I believe, kind of going into my isolation, but it could be TikTok, it could be influencers, maybe a handful of folks are still reading the New York Times, Washington Post. How do you guys think about that from the campaign?
Well, unfortunately, you have to tap into some of those, garbage mediums that are online, because that's what people are watching and that's what they're listening to every day, and then they tell all their friends about it.
A relatively small percentage of the news that people get comes from newspapers nowadays. So Charlie's right. It's TikTok and a whole lot of different things. To answer your question, a candidate has no choice but to tap those mediums, because otherwise you're left out. That is where people are getting their news, right? But from a larger perspective, a kind of sociological perspective, it's changed the way not just politics works, but actually our society works. People are atomized, listening to what they want to hear on a medium that is favorable to their view, and there really isn't a dialogue. We've got to find some solutions around that, and I think no matter what the outcome of the presidential election is, we've got to be thinking about how to lower the decibels and hear each other a little better.
Well, when we ran, it was an entirely different world, and Juan may be able to add to this. The way we message now is totally different, and it's like Henry is saying, if we don't go by that particular medium, you're not going to get your message out. The problem is, how can you package it? How can you make it interesting where people, and you're putting out good information, and that we do not engage in some of the hyperbole or attention-grabbing, comments and such, because everyone's doing it. The most popular members of Congress are usually not really the more responsible ones. It's the ones that can say something that's really outrageous and get the eyeballs.
And those are the ones that don't do a darn thing. And it's the ones who, probably at local as well, it's the ones who are doing the work all the time and getting legislation done, whether it's city, state, or federal. And the ones that are yakking all the time on the cable channels are the ones that don't do a darn thing.
And the other problem is these mediums lend themselves to malevolent actors, as we see.
Absolutely.
Social media hacked by Russia, China, Iran, and some of those things are actually getting into the bloodstream of the country. It's a pretty dangerous situation. We're going to have some really smart people look at this, because we can do damage to the future of the country.
And it's commonly known that the Chinese, where TikTok originates, do not let their kids see it after certain hours.
Yeah.
But in this country, it's the parents' responsibility. They just let them watch it all day. Even adults are watching it all day, and they know it poisons minds.
The thing I was going to mention for us to kind of be thinking about is the other thing you've seen that's really changed is the ability to go to scale with these kind of approaches, right? And so Saturday Night Live the other night kind of made fun of this, right? Where they, in the opening skit, where they had Tim Walt's character say, "I'm leaving to go with AOC to go play Fortnite on Twitch," right? But the truth is, I can remember when AOC first came out, when she came in for her first couple years in Congress, I can remember my son telling me to go on to Twitch and say, "Dad, watch this." And it was a really obscure event where there was someone from the UK who was doing a charity piece for transgender kids. And then all of a sudden the word came out that she was on there, and it was like tens of millions of people. And what we found out with the research was that AOC, as a freshman congressman, former congressman, had the same level of recognition as Nancy Pelosi as the speaker.
Wow.
Oh yeah,
2 years
sure.
Because of the power kind of coming through.
Yeah.
So just take it to a whole other level of the ability to reach numbers, but obviously with the messages that are going there, we're talking about 15 seconds, 20-second pieces that are a challenge to having a real conversation.
And we're going to touch on this more as the night goes on. There's so much to talk about here with this, especially in this new era and trying to reach all the age groups. I want to send it out right now. We have Yami Virhan with us in Laredo. She is standing by with Congressman Henry Cuellar, who in this race, the Texas Tribune has described this as Congressman Cuellar fighting for his political life against Commander Jay Furman. So Yami, if you can hear me, I see that you're there with the congressman. How is he feeling heading into this race tonight?
let's ask him. Jordan, good evening. Good evening, Texas. We are here in Laredo, Texas, one of the most important landlocked ports in the United States. Congressman Cuellar, the Texas Tribune has said that you are fighting for your political life. Jordan's asking how you're feeling tonight.
I feel very, very good about this election. We're going to win this election with the help of folks in San Antonio all the way down to Laredo and Stark County. I feel very, very good about this race. We will win this race with the help of the voters.
Now let's talk about this area. It goes from Laredo all the way through very rural parts of Texas to San Antonio, the 7th largest city in the United States. Why is this seat so important?
You know, because I sit in one committee that's very key for San Antonio and for Laredo and for the rural areas. I sit as the only Democrat on the House Appropriations. I sit on the Homeland Subcommittee on Appropriations, which is so money to make sure we add Border Patrol technology so we can secure the border. I sit on the Defense Appropriations, which is so important to the military, all the military bases in San Antonio. And then I also sit on the Military Construction / VA Subcommittee on Appropriations, which is, again, so important to San Antonio for all the military construction. In fact, Congressman Tony Gonzalez and I have been working together to construct what the needs are for the San Antonio bases. Two, a Democrat and a Republican, and we've been able to fulfill most of those projects. So therefore, my committee, as the only Democrat from the state of Texas on the House Appropriations, working with my Republican colleagues on the appropriations we've been producing for San Antonio, which includes that federal courthouse building that Senator John Cornyn and myself put together.
Let me ask you also, to be fair, you have Democrats, including AOC, Alexandria Ocasio de Nueva York, who was donating money to make sure that someone ran against you, your own party. Why is that?
Well, you know, again, I'm a moderate, and I work with both Democrats and Republicans. But look, let me tell you, the far left and the far right are what's causing a lot of problems we have in D.C. About 80% of the people want us to work together, or we work together. And I'm very bipartisan. I'm a Democrat, but I can work. Doesn't matter if it's a Republican president or a Democrat president. Doesn't matter if it's a Democrat majority in the House or a Republican majority. I produce. You know why? Because I treat people with civility and with respect. And that's the way we ought to be talking to each other, with civility and respect. And if you do that, you can produce no matter who is in power.
Do you think there is any room for moderates in Washington, D.C. to represent the people of the United States of America right now?
Absolutely. I think it's important for people that are moderates that can actually go up there, roll up their sleeves and get the job. Look, I was not elected, and I'm not going to be elected today to go make political statements. I got elected to produce. I'm a congressman, but I run like a mayor. And let me tell you what that means. I talk to the people and say, what are the needs? It's at roads, it's at water, it's at education, and that's what I do. Is I listen to the people. I don't take those talking points from Washington, D.C. without due respect. I listen to the people. I travel. My district, I represent 9 counties. Guadalupe, from Barrett County all the way to Atascosa, McMullen, Webb County, Duval, Jim Hogg, Zapata, and Stark County. So I represent 9 counties, and I do a good job because I listen to the people.
Reproductive rights, that is a big one. Reproductive rights is one of the reasons a lot of women are going out to vote. Your stance on that, some people don't agree with. Can you share with the people watching tonight what it is?
Well, look, I'm a pro-life, but I don't work against people that want to have some sort of balance in life. There have to be exceptions. You cannot say there cannot be no exceptions. And so I take a very moderate position when it comes to reproductive rights. If somebody needs to travel like they do here in Texas to somewhere else, I've supported that. But again, here we are in front of my church, the St. Patrick's Catholic Church. But again, I take a very moderate position when it comes to reproductive rights.
Well, and I want to bring someone in if we have a minute. It's two Cuellars.
It's the sheriff.
It's the sheriff, your brother. both from Laredo, Sheriff Cuellar. Tonight, tell people what's going on. You're already done running, correct?
That's correct. I don't have an opponent, right now.
Talk to us about how important it has been to have support in Washington, D.C., whoever gets elected, for what is going on here at the border. Many times I have called you and I've asked you to talk about immigration, and you have said, no, because we're doing what we have to do here. How important is it to have a congressman that is bringing money back to the border and working with both sides of the aisle?
Well, it's very important. Now, if I may say, I've been in law enforcement for about 44 years. A lot of that time I spent with DPS 27, and I was a sheriff 16. It's very important. I've recognized the importance of my brother Henry because I believe in him. He has been very pro law enforcement since he was a state rep. A lot of people don't know that he was a state rep, and he was very pro law enforcement. While I was with DPS, he helped DPS, secure funds for buildings, for everything, public safety. He continues to do that. And I think it's important for him to continue working with us. And, Henry has the same stand as law enforcement. And let me tell you why. Because as law enforcement, when we answer a call, we don't say, hey, are you Republican or Democrat? No, we take action and we service the people regardless of what they are, right? That's how it should be. Henry does the same thing. He crosses the aisle, and that's what he does, and he works together to provide the best service for his people, and that's what he does, and we need him here.
All right, thank you so much, Sheriff and the incumbent, Henry Cuellar, and your wife here. Thank you tonight, and we will be talking to you a little bit more in depth after the polls close. I'm looking at the time, Jordan. It's 6:56. There is a line. I don't know if you're going to be able to see it. There is a line in front of the fire station here in Laredo. People are still lined up waiting. Have you guys seen anything like this before?
Seen that.
We have never seen anything like that. It's just amazing what we're seeing right now. And it's not only here, but at different polls also.
All over the country, we're seeing long lines. Well, we're going to be here in Laredo. People are going to finish voting, and then we are going to come back. We are doing the watch party here in Laredo, and we also are attempting to get a hold of Commander Jay Furman. He is driving back to San Antonio. We have posted a few live hits that he has done, so we will be going to him also. And you still got some time. You got 3 minutes. If you're driving by a poll, just stop the car and go and vote. I tell everybody, do not complain to me if you do not go out and vote. Many Americans have died, have given up their lives, including my own father, who was in the military. So every single one of us who is a U.S. citizen has a right to vote. Sending it back to San Antonio and Jordan.
Yami, thank you so much. We'll check in a little bit. I could tell throughout that interview our panel is itching to talk. Since we are approaching 7, though, I do want to remind you statewide, if you are in line to vote by 7 p.m., you can vote. Stay in line. And we are seeing a lot of these lines around Bexar County as well. I want to check in with our panel, and then I want to show you some of those lines. We have our chopper up in the air.
You start. Okay.
So for our
I'll
crew over there,
Yep.
if we could see chopper after this. And then we have reporters that are, oh, look at that. We have it right now. Don't you guys love live TV? That sound that you're hearing is our chopper. Everything is okay. Don't be alarmed. So these are some of our polling locations here in Bexar County. We have seen long lines just like they're seeing in Laredo right now. We're going to check in with one of our reporters on the ground here in a little bit. But for our panel and for our viewers who may not know, Congressman Cuellar was indicted recently, and he is facing bribery, money laundering charges, and working on behalf of a foreign government. These indictments were nationwide news. He is running against Commander Jay Furman, who Yami said we're working to get in contact with for an interview this evening. Now, based on that interview and based on these indictments, to Professor Sepulveda and to our panel, what do you make of this? Do you think this is going to have a big impact on what ends up happening tonight?
Yeah, no, this is obviously the toughest race that Congressman Cuellar has faced in his career. And the question I really wanted to throw to the panel was, I'm curious to see what you guys are thinking about. Obviously, the big question is whether he survives tonight. But even if he does, right, Charlie, Henry, you guys know that the party has changed. Henry Cuellar is probably the most conservative Democrat, and there just aren't as many of the old blue dog Democrats. That's changed, and it's happened on both sides of the aisle. You don't see the liberal Republicans. You don't see the real kind of conservative Democrats. First of all, I'd love to see whether you guys think he's going to survive tonight, but more importantly, how does he go back to D.C. if he does win? Is he wounded? Can he continue to move forward? And particularly as he continues to be one of the furthest to the right within the party, and at a time when there's this whole notion of who's going to take control of the House, with the House being so close as well. Given that environment, I'd love to see what you guys think is the possibility of the future for Congressman.
Well, all of us expect Henry to slam dunk and have a good win in this election.
Okay.
He did have his toughest 2 elections before were primary battles.
Sure. Right.
So, and those were down to the wire, and they were ugly. And it was an example of how there were extremists in both political parties. Tony Gonzalez was a victim of one earlier in the primary. So both parties have challenges like this from extremists on either side. But Henry is very well liked in Congress. And Henry is also very well liked in this whole region. I was just sharing with the panel here how he's probably still gets more Republican support than any other Democrat in the country. And that continued even after this indictment. And Charlie and I served with a couple of members over the years. There are a couple of them from California, House members, a senator from Alaska, where the Justice Department just raids your home, destroys your career, and at the end of the day they go, hell, never mind. Now, of course, not all cases are like that, but I've heard some very interesting information about this case through someone who's connected indirectly to the Public Integrity Unit of the Justice Department, who sent out some indications that this case is not strong. I don't know. I'm just telling you what I've heard.
Sure.
Yeah. Well, real quick, Henry survives because redistricting and gerrymandering. You can gerrymander any Democrat out of existence, which has happened in the past few years. We used to have a lot of what we call blue dogs. Those are the conservative Democrats. They were pretty moderate when it came to social issues and such, education, healthcare and such, and then very conservative. But they were all gerrymandered out. And the reason Henry's been able to survive is that district still has not been gerrymandered to the point where a Republican would probably be able to take out a Democrat. But Henry is a real dying breed because of gerrymandering on both sides of the aisle. They've done away pretty much with the blue dogs, or at least the old Main Street Republicans, which would be the more moderate ones. As far as the criminal charges, very serious. It is an indictment. It's not an investigation. But there is the presumption of innocence, and that's something that you accord everyone, whether it's a member of Congress or a person off the street. And it's really important because I think that's due process, and we have to respect that. So until that happens, Henry's going to be fine. Tonight, like Henry was saying, we believe that he's going to do exceedingly well, as he always has. And it appears that Laredo is really turning out, which is an exception. Laredo doesn't turn out in great numbers.
That's his county, too. That's his home.
That's his home.
I want you to be careful with how you use the word Henry here tonight.
Oh, yeah.
Because you've got Henry Cuellar, Henry Bonilla, and Henry Cisneros. And, you got serious stuff we're talking
Well,
about.
we could have a whole Henry caucus. Just
I think
So-
that's what we should call
And
you guys.
his dad was Henry.
And my dad was
Father
Henry.
So we can't. Who knows about the merits of the case? As Charlie said, it's a serious matter, but the courts will address that in due course. I do know that there have been such abuses in the way Justice Department and other prosecutorial groups have gone after people that they're not viewed by the public in the same way. People want to wait for finality. The courts will speak, and we'll see what comes of that. But in the meantime, Henry Cuellar has been delivering for that district. Laredo is a phenomenon today. The population growth, the freight crossing at the border, the building of logistical facilities, and Henry Cuellar has been deeply involved in that every step of the way. In fact, if you were to take a poll in Laredo, what individual, what person is most responsible for the economic prosperity of Laredo, my guess is the people would say Henry Cuellar first and foremost. So they're going to stick with him until the courts prove otherwise. And as a result, I think he'll win tonight handily.
And I was just with him the other day, at an event in Washington, and the people that welcome him, talk to him, and all that, it's like normal. It's not like he's people are running from him or saying, "Hey, can't wait for you to not be here anymore, Henry." It's like business as usual.
The other thing I wanted to quickly say, just to kind of build on what former Congressman Bonilla had mentioned, was some of Henry's toughest races being the primaries. Another really interesting thing that's happening tonight is that for this current election cycle, this is the largest number from the local to the federal level of the races that are out there where folks are running unopposed, right? So when we talk about that notion of kind of gerrymandering, creating those safe districts, it's the highest percentage of people who really don't have anyone actually running against them tonight. It tends to be in the primaries. We're seeing that being sort of the trend in terms of where the toughest races are happening are within your party rather than against the other side.
That's exactly
And one,
right.
I think it's not only either no opposition, but it's also light opposition that can't hurt the incumbent. So we see Joaquin Castro with no opposition. We see Tony Gonzalez with an opponent that he likely will beat. We see Casar, who represents this area from Austin, and he has a relatively beatable opponent. So we're going to see pretty much a return of the delegation from this region to Congress, I think.
And I bet no one on this program could even, without looking at it in writing, could tell you who the opponent is for Tony Gonzalez, for Casar, and for a couple of the others that are mentioned.
I've been researching,
There
sir.
you go. But you're
know.
you're unique in that regard.
Very true, though.
I want to ask you all as well, Congressman Cuellar's opponent, Jay Furman, Commander Jay Furman, has also taken some heat because he said in an interview that he specifically chose this district to run in. I believe he told the Texas Tribune he owns property up near Austin, but chose this district because of its proximity to the border and feels that he has a chance to win because of these indictments. What do you make of that and this idea of kind of choosing the district that you run in based on something like that?
I have two congressmen here on my side, but I correct me if I'm wrong, but this is the only office that you do not have to live in the district. You do not have to live in the district to run for Congress. Now, of course, politically, you should live in the district, but there are people who move into districts and make a career out of running from another place.
Yeah, if Charlie and I decided we want to run again for Congress in the Dallas area,
We could.
that ain't going to work.
Yes, I would not live in Dallas. Now, you really think about this. If you're evaluating your best chances, and you have to be practical, and you think those are deficits, the fact that, you're near the border, that congressman has been indicted and such, I understand the advantages that some perceive that they're going to have. Tonight it'll be a big surprise. There is no advantage, predicated on the reasons that he gave.
I have a dear friend named Bill Richardson, who now unfortunately has passed away. But when he was a young man, he wanted to run for Congress, and he concluded that New Mexico was the best place for him to run for Congress.
Wow.
So Bill moved to New Mexico, ran a losing race for Congress, then ran a winning race for Congress, then became ambassador to the United Nations, then became Secretary of Energy, then became governor of New Mexico, and ran for president. So picking the district is not always suicide.
No. but you bringing up his name brings back some fond memories
Great
for
man.
me. We had some
Good
work
friend.
we did together to pass free trade.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And he was just always a joy to work with.
Yeah.
And he didn't just pick on somebody because they were Republicans or whatever. He tried to find out who here is going to work on significant issues, and let's get it done.
He also made a reputation getting Americans out of hostage situations elsewhere in the world.
He could go anywhere in the world and
North
sit
Korea,
down,
Africa,
and
the Caribbean,
negotiate, like you said.
Cuba, get people back, get
Yep.
people out. Yeah.
Thank you all. We're going to check back in with you here in just a little bit. I'm going to turn us to a Texas State House race now.
Oh.
We have several in this area that
Lujan.
are pretty competitive. And a lot of these center around the fight for school vouchers, which is something that Governor Greg Abbott has been pushing for. We have Matt Roy with us right now. He has been covering the very competitive and very controversial race between incumbent John Lujan and Kristen Carranza. So Matt is joining us tonight from the headquarters for John Lujan. What has the attitude been like so far, Matt, in this race?
Yeah, I mean, the attitude so far here at the Mission Open Air Market on the south side is pretty optimistic. I spoke with Christian Carranza's campaign. They're pretty optimistic as well, but I'm not sure how many Henrys are in this room. I'll ask so we can figure it out for the panel. But guys, John Lujan is very optimistic about this. Do you? Okay, good. John Lujan very optimistic about this race right now. 50, 60 people in here, and we're expecting him here at the Mission Open Air Market in about 30, 40 minutes. I caught up with Christian Carranza down at Precinct 1 while she was kind of talking to voters, giving them the last second face-to-name action. She was very cautiously optimistic as well. They anticipate this race coming down to 200, maybe 300 votes, so every single one counting in a district that's gone back and forth between Democrats and Republicans over the last 5-10 years.
All right, Matt, thank you. And we touched on school vouchers a little bit already, but that is one of the make or breaks for this race specifically. There's been a campaign in Texas to get people in the House of Representatives who are willing to vote for that. Where do John Lujan and Christian Carranza stand on that, and how could that play a role here today?
It's one of the major breaking points and differences between the two campaigns. John Lujan, a staunch supporter of vouchers. He has gotten Governor Greg Abbott's support when it comes to because of his stance on vouchers, really. Same with House District 121, when it comes to Mark LaHood. Same kind of thing here. And then Christian Carranza, on the other hand, very against vouchers, very for public education, thinks that vouchers will defund public education, take money out and put it towards private education, only further subsidizing that. So very different stances, and this race right here actually could make or break vouchers for the state of Texas. It's one of those things, if Democrats can flip this seat, that takes one number away from Greg Abbott's kind of tally that he has been keeping ever since the House voted to take out vouchers from the bill that was introduced in the legislative session last year. So it's a pretty key race when it comes to flipping. Is there going to be vouchers, or is there not going to be vouchers? This race could help decide that here in Texas.
Just a little bit. Now, we are going to also check in with our reporter, Jay Avila, here shortly. To my crew, if we can, I'd love to take a look at our board. We have a lot of races, a lot of results coming in now that I want to show you, if that's okay. I'm going to slowly move this direction. So this is what we've got so far on our map. Now, not all of these states are 100% reporting so far, but we are starting to see results roll in. Now, this in Texas that has flipped red, it was just blue a moment ago as we're starting to get these early results in. As you can see, we've got a little over 1 million votes counted each way here in Texas so far. No specific electoral college votes assigned just yet. So we will keep an eye on that as things roll through, but I want to be able to show you kind of as these results come in, kind of how we're looking all across America at the moment. So we have got this so far. I do want to show you, we also have this balance of power for the House and the Senate that we're going to be looking at through the evening that's going to update. We'll be able to kind of see this as it shifts. We also will be looking at some of these House races here in Texas that are going to be very big for what happens for our future. Some of these districts are reporting, some not yet. So we'll be checking in on these as the night goes on as well. So I want to throw it over to our reporter, Jay Avila now. He is at the Bexar County Elections headquarters, and it's been very busy across Bexar County for this whole election. We saw long lines in early voting. We saw good early voting turnout here. Jay, it's a little past 7. The polls are getting ready to close. What are you seeing out there right now as we near the end of this?
Well, Jordan, this is the Bexar County election headquarters, so it's not only the spot where they'll be tabulating all the votes tonight, it's also a voting center, and there has been a long line. You can see through the windows there, people are still lined up. So there's several high-traffic voting sites all around Bexar County that still have lines of people, and all of them are going to get to vote, even though the polls closed here just a short time ago. So that's going to delay things a little bit. We've been told that while everyone's waiting to vote, election workers have been inside here, and for some time now, they've been able to start working on the mail-in vote and votes from early voting. And so that's being compiled and tabulated first. And we're told that any minute now, we might see some of those totals pop up on the county's website, or someone out here will come up and brief us. But we were told 7:15 maybe Central Time for some of these early voting period results and mail-in results. Now, election day results are a completely different story because, as I said, many of these sites have to wait for everyone in line to vote. Once they have everyone that has had a chance to vote, then there's work that has to be done. These election judges and the other election workers, they have to, first of all, they have to go through and look at the list of everyone who signed in and make sure that it's the same number, same amount of people as the number of ballots they have. So the same number of people voted as who signed in. If that matches, then they go through all the paperwork, things like chain of custody, things like that. And once they get all that straight, then all of the election workers at 302 voting sites throughout Bexar County, they've all got to take their thumb drives with the voting information to one of 5 substations, they call it. This is one of the substations that it's actually where they come here and they input their information directly in person. But the other 4 substations, they send the information via a hard line that is secure straight here to Election Central. So all that has to take place after the polls close, and that's kind of what they're in the process of doing right now. So bottom line, we're told we likely will not see election day returns from today start to pop up until around 8:15 at the earliest, and of course we won't get them all at once. They kind of trickle in large chunks. So that's kind of the way things are working right now, Jordan. I'm told there are several other sites that had really heavy traffic today, and they are still waiting for the lines to go down.
And Jay, you have been a really key reporter for us when it comes to looking at a lot of the election security, election integrity conversations that have been happening in Bexar County. There has been a lot of back and forth with AG Ken Paxton. Excuse me. You have obviously learned so much about this process. You totally laid out for us how this is going to go now that the polls have closed. What would you say has been your biggest takeaway about election security, election integrity, getting that inside look at this process?
Well, many people are worried about the security of the voting totals and information as it comes in. And as I just told you, that they're using a secure line from these substations to send in the data. They say that line is only used on election day, and that it is triple protected and encrypted. And many of the election judges are bringing the thumb drives in here themselves. So there are always going to be concerns. I know this afternoon they had some glitches and some problems with the actual touch screen and the laptop that has the voter registration roll on it. And they had some glitches where they went down for some time, and people worried I'm going to lose my voting information. Also, the glitch was caused by some MiFi devices that only allowed that laptop to talk to the terminal where you use the touch screen. It wasn't on the internet. It was kind of best way to describe it as they only transfer names back and forth. There's no voting totals that do it. So it gets so complicated that they just know that at some point things must be compromised. But we haven't seen that on a wide scale. Hopefully that will not happen. They go to great lengths here to keep things secure.
All right, Jay, thank you so much. I know you have another hit to get to here soon, so thank you so much for your time. Professor Sepulveda, I wanted to ask you, this has been such a huge conversation in Texas about election security and making sure things are running the way that they are supposed to. We saw raids here in Bexar County from the AG's election integrity unit. What do you make of that and the conversations surrounding all of this, especially this year?
Yeah, this is one of those classic things where it all depends on how you see the world, right? On one end of the spectrum, if you really believe that there are challenges, even that the term election integrity is something you've heard a lot coming from the Republican side, particularly former President Trump. And so this notion of kind of needing answers to problems that don't really exist, but the notion of, hey, it's better to be safe as we're kind of moving forward. On the other side, you're kind of seeing this as a political side, a move from the Democrats, right? Of kind of saying, when we think about voter protection, when we think about how we're targeting folks, I mean, just think about what happened. There's just the images of kind of, these grandmothers who were kind of being, their houses kind of being raided because of what they were supposedly kind of doing. And so, once again, it kind of reinforced the notion of the two bases as kind of being where, as opposed to what we were talking about earlier, that notion of trying to come across, almost that notion of folks in the middle or the moderates, like you're on a side, and depending on how you see the world, you'll kind of play it out. And you'll see, for the Texas side, obviously this is a really big thing in terms of the amount. There's been the question of the amount of money that's gone statewide to kind of these efforts to really not find anything that's there. And so there's all that question for folks who in the past, when the party had been talked about, a party of efficiency and lower budgets and kind of less intrusion from the government, you've had one side coming at them and attacking them for that position as well. But it's really one of these things. It all depends on how you see the world.
Absolutely. Well, even today we were learning that the AG's office had undercover people at some of those bigger ballot counting locations just to make sure. There's been a back and forth with the Department of Justice about if the federal monitors
whether they could even be
in
here
Texas
in person,
polling places.
right?
We're going to check in with our panel about that in just a little bit as well. We have our reporter Stephanie Esquivel standing by now. She's also at a polling location. Stephanie, I see a lot of people behind you still, so we're approaching 7:30 right now, and still all of these people are in line. What are you seeing out there?
Well, Jordan, I am actually not at a polling location. I am now at the watch party for Lena Prado, who is the Bexar County Precinct 1 Commissioner candidate. She is the challenger. Now, I have spoken to Prado in the past, who tells me her number one priority is to update the infrastructure for Precinct 1, which geographically speaking is the largest. It's South Bexar County. It goes all the way up to Alamo Ranch, and she says the infrastructure really needs to be updated to better serve the community. I did also speak to incumbent Rebecca Clay Flores, who tells me she's not hosting a watch party tonight, but she's more than confident voters will elect her to serve a second term. Clay Flores tells me she's proud of what she's already accomplished in Precinct 1 and is looking forward to serving a second term. Now, we will be updating voter results throughout the night for this race, but for now, Jordan, I'm going to toss it back to you.
All right, Stephanie, thank you very much. We're going to check back in here in a little bit. Now, I'm hearing from our panel that we're getting some proposition numbers in right now. I'd love to toss it back over to you guys. What are you making of what we're seeing so far as these early vote totals start to come in?
What I have just seen in terms of the propositions is that they're all passing at the moment. Now, I don't know whether that represents all of the early vote, probably, because when they release the early vote, it's all of the early vote. But the one that I think is the most critical is Proposition C, and that's the one that would have allowed the city council to set the salary for the city manager and tenure for the city manager, undoing the previous charter amendment, which would have restricted the salary, very dangerous when you're competing in the marketplace for talent, and set the tenure so that the city manager, Eric Walsh, would have to leave office. No matter whether he was doing the best job in the world, he'd be forced out. So it's a positive thing for San Antonio, in my opinion. I wrote an op-ed urging people to vote for Proposition C, but at least at the moment, I don't know what the today election results would be. It looks like in the early vote, all the propositions are carrying, and that's very progressive for San Antonio. Let me just say, I firmly believe the people of San Antonio appreciate the long-term progress of our city. We've had a pretty good consensus, both with the public and our elected officials, mayors and city councils, about the economic growth, about bringing people into the mainstream economically, and we needed these propositions to keep that train going.
And as you know, Henry, the business community spent a lot of money pushing, especially for C. And then you had the firefighters that were, but I hear in the last week or so that there was a diminished presence of firefighters at the polls. Maybe you heard that as well.
Yep. The firefighters were the ones who passed this proposition when they were having a fight with the previous city manager, Cheryl Scully. I thought it was a mistake for them to get into this fight because Cheryl Scully's no longer here. We have a city manager who's doing a tremendous job. But there's some people who believe that if you have a weaker city manager, you can then go around that person and go to the individual council members and get your way on the city council. If that were to become the rule, the way, that would be chaotic for our city and a very negative thing. We benefit from having the competence, managerial competence of a strong city manager, but also a good mayor and city council. So I'm happy this is going in this direction so far tonight.
Well, and another proposition that I wanted to ask you specifically about, sir, it would raise city council and pay for the mayor. The city council salary would go from $45,000 to about $70,000. The mayoral salary would go from $61,725 to more than $87,000. I pulled this stat, Mr. Cisneros. When you were the mayor of San Antonio, you made $4,500 per year. One of the lowest paid major city mayors in the country at the time. That's almost 20 times less. Hearing that number, hearing that salary, what do you think that means for San Antonio?
He got this suit.
Position?
My enemies would say you get what you. My enemies would say you get what you pay for. But the truth of the matter is, we're at 1.5 million people. We are the 7th largest city in America. That is a big job, and we want the best talent we can get on the city council, and of course the best talent we can get as mayor. And you can't ask a person to sacrifice their family's well-being so they can have the glory and the honor of being the mayor of San Antonio. You want someone who can afford to do it. And you know, even at the salaries that you just described, it's still not enough to compensate for what is a 24/7 job, Saturdays, Sundays, and every day of the week in a city of this size. And by the way, our system is working. We are a progressive city, respected all over America for our progress, making good progress on everything from crime prevention to economic development to educational initiatives. And I think we need to keep the momentum going and pay people if we expect them to work for us.
Well, at one time, Henry, it was really looked at as a part-time job, and we had a strong city manager by design.
Right.
We needed a professional, full-time city manager because everybody else was viewed as part-time.
Yeah.
But
and that would work when we were, could work for a city of 100,000 people.
And it all changed. But the thing to term limit a city manager, I always thought was insanity, to be honest with you. But the one thing I want to ask,
the combination of those things, Charlie, you limit the person's tenure, which puts you in the market to hire a new city manager, but you tell the people you're interviewing that they can only make so much, and it's lower now than Austin or Dallas.
No, it never made sense.
The budget now is $3.8
billion.
Yeah. And you can't have a recent college grad CPA managing that.
That was just a frustration and anger directed at Cheryl Scully.
Yes.
I mean, if you can believe that's what happened, that's really what happened. But I want to ask former Mayor Cisneros here about changing the length of a term from 2 years to 4 years. Now, you're still going to only have 8 years.
Yeah.
But because Henry and I, when we ran for Congress, we had to face the voters every 2 years.
So did I.
Well,
as council member and as mayor.
But they're changing it tonight, aren't they?
Yes, they are. Yes, they are. And that was a Charter Commission recommendation. I was okay with running every 2 years because I never, like you guys, I never had to gear up for the election period. I was running all the time.
You were running. You're just running.
The full 2 years.
That being challenging.
Yeah, but and the people kind of like the idea of calling people back, if they don't like what they're doing. But we're a large city, and to put somebody in there that can learn the job, do it effectively over a 4-year span, I think it's the proper thing to do. The larger we get, the more demanding we should be of our leadership, and give them a chance to develop, give them a chance to learn the ropes. So I think it's the right thing to do.
Anything you want to add on that, sir?
The only thing I'll mention is this used to be one of my favorite political trivia questions, right? Where I would ask people across the country, hey, we're the 7th largest city in the country, San Antonio. How much money do you think we're paying our city council members and our mayors? And like we were saying, though, like Charlie Gonzalez was mentioning, these salaries were set in the 1950s, right? San Antonio was a tiny little place, and it wasn't until just a little less than a decade ago that we kind of changed it. So, but there's serious implications of that, right? Of who can run, or what do you have to do to sacrifice to be able to do that. If you're not wealthy, what you kind of have to go through. And so it's nice to see that we kind of continue to move in the right direction.
When I was mayor,
matches who we are as a city.
When I was mayor, I made The council members made $40 a week,
Right.
and the mayor made $80 a week. So I was just
Right.
and I was lucky to have a wife who understood that. My daughters asked for food occasionally.
Yeah, and if you didn't, and if it was Thanksgiving or Christmas and you didn't have a meeting that week, right? You didn't get your 80. Yeah, right.
That's true. That's true. But I was lucky.
When,
I was.
when we go to a break, I'm going to ask him if he still has trouble making ends meet.
I was a university professor in the University of Texas and later Trinity. Allowed me to teach and be a professor there and be council member and mayor at the same time, or I wouldn't have been able to serve. Pure and simple.
Definitely. Well, we're going to keep an eye on these propositions tonight as it moves through. We're also watching several other cities and some of the measures on their ballot. I want to take you back over to our monitor here. We are going to check in with our reporter, Destiny Fuller, but I want to tell you a little bit about this Texas State House race that we're looking at now. This is
yeah,
District
That's a pickup
80.
for
Former
This
mayor
is,
of
Uvalde.
Uvalde.
in the
yeah.
Uvalde
He-
area.
and that
so
was
we
the
have Don
King's
McLaughlin
seat.
and Cecilia Castellano. If Don McLaughlin looks familiar, it's because he was all over our airwaves after the Robb Elementary School shooting in 2022. He was the mayor of Uvalde at the time, now running for this seat that was occupied by Tracy King, who is not running. So now we have these two candidates. And Cecilia Castellano, we were telling you a little bit earlier about some of the raids that we saw from the Election Integrity Unit at the Texas Attorney General's office, and her campaign was involved in some of those raids. There were officials that were sent to investigate surrounding her campaign, so a lot of eyes have been on this one. We have Destiny Fuller in Uvalde tonight with the McLaughlin campaign. Destiny, what are you hearing? What is the mood there in Uvalde? And I also would love for you to lay out for people how they do their election results, because it's very unique compared to what we see in other cities.
Yeah, that's right, Jordan. Right now, it's still a little bit light out here as people are wrapping up. The polls closed at 7. Some people are still starting to trickle in. When we first got here, we are in downtown Uvalde, right in front of the local newspaper, which is the Uvalde News Leader. There was no one here. Now people are slowly starting to roll in. I'm going to step out of the way so Everett can show you some of the things going on behind us. There's a little bit of a crowd gathering right in front of the Uvalde News Leader, and they've also got treats and goodies. But if we focus on these little whiteboards that you see right here, that's exactly what Jordan was talking about. They are going to be keeping up with the totals of all of the votes that come in tonight the old-fashioned way. Someone is going to stand in front of those whiteboards as the results come in tonight, and they're going to fill out each and every one of those boxes. Each box is for a specific precinct, and then the row is for the corresponding race. At the end of the night, they'll tally them up, and they will have a hand tally of some of those races. And of course, the reason why we are here is to catch up with Mr. Don McLaughlin himself, and he is going to tell us a little bit about his expectations for this race, what campaigning has looked like for him so far. We also plan on catching up with Cecilia Castellano. She is at a private celebration. We haven't been able to catch up with her in person, but we do plan to talk to her tonight about her outlook as well. Jordan, we'll talk to you in just a little bit. I'm going to send it back.
Destiny, thank you. And I wanted you all to see that, because where else are you going to see election results coming in on a whiteboard like that? We're over here checking our computers and checking our phones. But in Uvalde, it's a tradition. They go and they look at these whiteboards. We've covered several elections there now, and a lot of people come out to see those results come in. Every election, I think that is so cool to see. I want to bring Professor Sepulveda back in. What do you make of this race and the impact that it could have on Texas? Tracy King held this seat for so long. It's got Uvalde, it's got the border. There's a little bit of everything here.
It's obviously a very interesting district, but you can see with the early numbers kind of where it's kind of potentially playing itself out. In that sense, probably not going to change the legislature much, but obviously just a different voice, a different kind of game, but also partly because of its little physical location, really going to be able to play itself into some of the key issues that folks are talking about.
Absolutely. And walk us through some of those early results. What are we seeing for HD 80 so far?
They look, we're seeing right now is kind of a huge, and now, right now, I don't see percentages here, right? So we'll have to kind of look at it, but in terms of how much of the vote is in, but it's looking right now like just a huge lead right now in the early stages.
Right, for Mayor McLaughlin.
Yeah.
So we're going to continue checking in on that over the course of the evening as well. I want to bring in our panel if they're willing to. So this is a district that includes Uvalde. Obviously, over the course of the last few years, we saw the mass shooting at Robb Elementary, the mayor now running for this House seat. Is that something that we see fairly often if there is a tragedy like that or a headline making event in a district that some of those leaders then seek bigger roles.
That we help Republicans that are they're pro free enterprise. They're not far right. They don't get involved in social issues. But so we watch the races all across the state. This one is again significant, as the professor pointed out, because of it reaches, and as your map showed, it reaches and goes down to the border. So huge Hispanic border area population, which is significant for the way the whole state's laid out politically, with the Republican growth that's also occurring between here and the Valley, with the pickups we had with the Representative Lopez down in the Valley, Ryan Guillen in Floresville that goes down to the Valley. And so it's part of the trend of Hispanic supporting more conservative candidates that we've seen over the last 2 cycles. And it is a +1 seat for the Republicans as well.
I know both of these candidates. Cecilia Castellano is a very, very effective advocate for small business. She runs a small business with her husband, and she's been a major force in rethinking the procurement strategies for all of the public agencies in our region. She's a very charismatic and attractive candidate. I also know the mayor. I was in Uvalde shortly after the shooting there, and he got pretty high marks from everybody in the community for the kind of leadership that he provided. And it doesn't surprise me that, given the makeup of the district and the lean toward conservatism, that he would have been an attractive and popular figure. And he's running ahead in these early returns. Basically, a good man who did his very best in an incredibly difficult situation, which was the school shootings in Uvalde.
And he also has a unique knack. He's not Hispanic, but he has a good way of communicating and embracing all the communities between Uvalde and to the border.
If you go back and you start looking again, I'm going to talk about redistricting and what happens. Tracy King was really an exception to the rule, and his voting record was one of conservative, moderate. Yeah. And he probably would have survived, but I don't know how much longer, to be honest with you, the way things get redrawn all the time. And the mayor was very popular, and he handled the horrible situation in the best possible terms, disappointed very few people in his performance. So I think it'd be almost a natural fit for a Republican to have taken that seat. In my opinion, it was a Republican seat. Even this last 2 years ago, when King still was good and survived.
If he wanted to run again, he would have won.
I think he would have won, just because he was such a, respected, liked, and he listened and all that. But it's a Republican district, and I think the mayor, like I said, was pretty popular to begin with. You have a tragedy of that dimension, and you handle it well, and you still seek a higher office. That's a good thing. And
he got a lot of press at that time. He was on the television a lot throughout the region. Everybody was glued to the TV, and he seemed like a person who was trying to create, some opportunity for the families that were impacted. He was trying to get money to help them individually with help for their children who were injured, people who had funeral expenses, and I think people looked to him as like one of the adult voices in the room when there was utter chaos around him.
Absolutely. And one of the things that is noteworthy to us as journalists and as reporters, especially here in San Antonio, because we were out there from day one. I was one of the first people to get to Robb Elementary that day, and from the day that it happened, the mayor was always one of the people that was calling for transparency. He wanted every police department to release their video and their documents. He has been calling for that the entire time and is still calling for that. I also want to note, we actually have a district here in Texas too. This one, there we go. Rhonda Hart is also running for U.S. Congress. Her daughter was killed in the Santa Fe school shooting back in 2018. She also is seeking office now. A lot of her platform is based around gun laws and things like that after that event. So we are seeing this in a couple different races here in Texas.
Well, and we just came through a Senate primary in which Senator Gutierrez from San Antonio was one of the candidates against Colin Allred, and his whole campaign was Uvalde and the gun situation.
Absolutely. So we're going to circle back on that race. I want to take you now to a race that we are closely watching here in San Antonio, and that is the Tony Gonzalez race. As you can see, a lot of border in this district, specifically District 23. Tony Gonzalez right now with the early voting numbers, it looks like we've got about 41% reporting. He is leading with 59%, 40.5% for Santos Limon. Our Taylor Whartonby is out tonight covering this race. Obviously, immigration, one of the key issues here. Taylor, what are you hearing from both sides so far about how this race is going?
Hey, Jordan. So I'm currently at the Cowboy Dance Hall. This is the Democratic Watch Party for Santos Limon and other Democrats here. I'm joined with Juan, who lives in the 23rd District. Tell me, what are your thoughts about
If you guys weren't here tonight, you'd be at that
Santos
event.
Limon, he's out there.
Right there.
A lot of the communities.
Serving beer.
It's a big district, I believe 29 counties, and just trying to listen to our concerns early on. I know he talked to a lot of community leaders in my hometown, so hopefully there'll be a good victory tonight. So I'm looking forward to a Congressman Limon in the future.
And what are your thoughts of this being his first race? And also, he's a civil engineer.
Well, first-time candidate. I mean, you're going out there, you're talking to a lot of the political folks out there that understand the landscape, and just listening to those folks, and listening to the concern of the people. I think that's what's going to make a successful candidate. And like I said, he did the work talking to a lot of the folks, at least in my community. I know that he went to other communities nearby, and just listening to those folks on the ground, I think that that's going to help him tonight.
And what do you think about the crowd here tonight?
Oh, it's a really great crowd. I've talked to a couple of folks that are on the way, and we're just kind of happy, and it's uplifting, and hopefully we get some more victories up and down the ballot. We're looking forward to a Democratic landslide.
Thank you, Juan. So I did reach out to Tony Gonzalez earlier today. He did decline an interview. They said they will provide a statement either tonight or tomorrow. We are still waiting on that, and we'll give you some updates. But for now, Jordan, back to you.
Taylor, thank you. I want to loop in Congressman Bonilla. You were District 23 once upon a time. What kind of changes have you seen in this district as things have continued over the years?
Well, it has changed. The boundaries have changed. It's a little bit more favorable to a Republican, and it's interesting to note that before you put that up, I pay attention to politics. I didn't even remember the opponent's name in the general election because that opponent is really insignificant in this race. Tony didn't spend any money at all on television for the general election, or I don't think he spent much on mail either. He was sending emails out and some social media, but his battle was in the primary. And it's really, again, like Henry Cuellar was challenged by the radical left, Tony was challenged by the far right and in this primary, and that was his race this year. So this is a slam dunk for Tony. I've known him since before he ran for office. He's a good guy, and a hell of a lot of Democrats out there also agree with that.
And I would say further, Henry, that if someone were writing a Profiles in Courage book like the one that President Kennedy wrote, Tony Gonzalez might well be in that book, because after Uvalde, he advocated as a conservative Republican for some adjustments to the gun laws, which were reasonable.
Yep.
Red flag and other things. For that, he got a primary opponent.
Yep.
And then there came several other issues during the time where he just took the centrist but principled stance, reasonable stance, and he took a beating for it. They censured him in some meetings and such, and he just said, look, I'm a former Navy seaman. I know what's good for this country, in my opinion, and I'm going to stand up for it no matter who attacks me. And, well, tonight he was rewarded by his constituents with a win.
And then he had also the state party that was targeting him as well, which is insane. That you have your own party your own family. I always used to say, you don't agree on everything in your own home or your own place of business or your place of worship. And some of these nuts on politics, whether it's on the right or the left, oh, you weren't with me on, there were 25 issues, and on one thing, number 25, I think you said something in committee or you didn't vote the right way. And we're coming after you now.
Henry, please don't compare politics to home life or a house of worship. It's not that kind of a house. It is a house divided. But seriously, and Juan knows what I'm talking about right now. And we are suffering in this country now because of gerrymandering for political purposes, which only recently, in the last few years, has been sanctioned by the Supreme Court of the United States. In other words, a partisan legislature can redistrict all of the state and federal congressional districts, representative and state senator districts for political advantage, and it's not unconstitutional. And once that started, we see what's happening. You just heard some great praise of Tony Gonzalez. What did he win his primary by, 300 and something votes? I forget.
The runoff. Yeah.
And the person that ran against him, the other Republican, his nickname was what, AK-47?
Right.
I mean, Juan knows what I'm talking about. But until we start figuring out how we get away where you get primaried out because you're a moderate, we're going to have issues.
And here's another thing about that primary. In a Republican runoff, I think the turnout for that runoff was like 5 or 6%. Do people even care anymore? Again, all of these issues that are happening are not all the fault of the candidates at all.
Oh, no.
Or the people running. It's about the people who don't demand better.
Well, and I want to pull you into Professor Sepulveda. I hear that primary was quite difficult for Tony Gonzalez against Brandon Herrera, and you're right, his nickname was something of that nature.
Right.
Why do you think he faced such an uphill battle?
Well, I think it's exactly how they were just talking about right now. The real races, because of the gerrymandering, because of the way the districts have been drawn, the real races now are happening within the party itself, right? And so, and once again, you either have that, or we talked about earlier, or you have no opposition, right, when you're kind of coming into it. This is a district that is, like former Congressman Benito was saying, the lines have changed, but just a cycle or two ago, this was a competitive seat, right? You look at the Cook Political Report, Inside Elections, Sabato, all the national folks, all of them saw this tonight, exactly what our guests are saying, as a solid slam dunk for Congressman Gonzalez. And so, once again, the extremes that get pulled out on both sides lead to the kind of politics, and also, like we were saying, turning off voters and leading to really kind of low turnouts as well. So it's kind of in a strange way even easier to win. Closer races within your primaries, but almost nobody participating. Probably not a good recipe for us and for democracy.
Right. So we'll continue to keep an eye on that race, but right now Tony Gonzalez does have a healthy lead. I want to switch now. We have reporters in cities all over Texas watching some of those more local races. In Austin right now we have Walt Macaborski joining us. There are judges on the ballot, school board decisions, different propositions. Walt, what are you watching most closely tonight in Austin?
We're obviously following all the local races, but you wake up this morning and we're in national headlines because Joe Rogan endorses Trump, and then you have Elon Musk flying out to Florida to watch election results with Trump. So all of a sudden, not only are we on the national map, the big races in Austin are the future of affordability. So the mayor's race is key, and the incumbent Mayor Kirk Watson, a strong lead tonight with 53% of the vote so far. He was a mayor in the late 90s. He was then a state representative for about 17 years. He's the incumbent mayor, and he is doing very well tonight with 53% of the vote. Interesting, we thought Kathy Tobo, who was on the council, was going to be his biggest challenger, and she is actually in third tonight up against Carmen Yanez Polito with 20% of the vote, which is a great showing for her. We didn't really expect that, but two interesting propositions to talk about tonight. Austin ISD Proposition A. They're trying to get teachers raises, and they only can do that with a VATR, a voter-approved tax rate. So they look like they're going to get this passed and give raises to about 5,000 teachers. But it's a double-edged sword here, mainly because, they're going to raise $171 million, but only get $41 million because of recapture. So a lot of voters were saying, why should I vote for this if 75% of my money is going to go back to other counties in the state for other school districts? But it looks like those, so far, the teachers are going to get their raise. But it's going to cost taxpayers about $420 on their tax bill. Also, they have another proposition, Proposition A in the city of Austin, that will go to affordable child care, and it looks like that is passing as well. So voters are adding money to their tax bill, but they're going to give teacher raises, and it looks like a lot of the employees in Austin will get some child care benefits, which will be great because we know child care is so expensive. Another interesting note, Williamson County, usually very strong Republican stronghold, and it looks like in the Senate race that they're voting for Colin Allred more so than Cruz, which is interesting. Williamson County, is it turning purple?
Now, Walt, you said so many interesting things. I came up with a million questions to ask you. I want to start with, you pointed out that Elon Musk is going to be at Mar-a-Lago watching with Donald Trump. The Texas Tribune is also reporting that our Attorney General Ken Paxton will be there, along with Agricultural Commissioner Sid Miller. Now, about those propositions for putting money toward teacher raises, a lot of districts across the state are putting things like this on the ballot. And at least here around in the San Antonio area, we're hearing a lot of kind of animosity for the State House for maybe not allocating all of that funding so that people have to go to ballot measures like this. Are you seeing that in Austin as well? What is the attitude toward the legislature and kind of the path that has led a lot of districts to do this?
A lot of angry voters. You know, they want our teachers to have raises, and they want to keep the money in Austin. They're raising $171 million if this passes tonight, but only $41 million stays here. So the big debate for everybody at the ballot box was, is it worth it that I'm sending my tax money around the state? 75% won't even stay here, but it looks like the teachers are going to get their raises, but that's a problem. So I think there's going to be a lot of lobbying at the state legislature to say, hey, keep our money local, keep our money for our teachers, invest in the teachers, the programs, and make sure our education system keeps that money. So you're exactly right, Jordan, a lot of angst there. But you were talking about Rogan. You know, we were looking at polling places throughout Austin and in Travis County, and we went to the University of Texas. There was sometimes a 2-hour wait for students and young people to go and vote. That was basically the biggest polling spot for students and young people to go at the University of Texas. They were waiting 2 hours to do it. Was that part of the Joe Rogan effect, or was it just engaged students wanting to vote? That'll be something interesting to see.
Absolutely. Walt, thank you so much. I know you have another cut-in coming up here in a couple minutes, so thank you so much for your time tonight. Professor Sepulveda, what Walt was just saying is right up your alley with young people voting. Is it the Joe Rogan effect? You work with young people all day, every day. What kinds of reactions are you seeing from them about this election and from endorsements like Joe Rogan and Taylor Swift and all these people that young people typically would look up to?
Yeah, and like we were mentioning earlier, there's obviously a new set of influencers, right? A new set of folks that young folks are looking up to and kind of learning, taking their news, taking their kind of direction from them. It's going to be interesting to see if this actually, the challenge obviously is young people usually don't turn out in large numbers. And because we're not a battleground state, you didn't see that same kind of resources. When we were on the Obama campaign in 2008, I remember we made it happen, but it was 4 times more expensive to kind of get a young voter or a less frequent voter to kind of show up than someone who was kind of a more consistent voter. And so, and the other thing that you're seeing right now is that they traditionally tend to be more progressive when they're younger. So you're also seeing this interesting, we were talking about the gender gap in the presidential race at the top of the ticket, particularly with women and men. But what's interesting is that we're seeing from the polling from the Institute of Politics at Harvard that does the best youth polling, that young men are not as progressive as they typically are in past cycles. And so if you have that combination, that's obviously something that the former president is looking to kind of build upon. So if somehow he can get a Rogan to be that influencer, get him to show up and have folks who are a little bit less progressive than they had been in the past, then it's really interesting thing we saw in the data recently was at the top of the ticket in kind of the more senior voters, you had a percentage of the women who were saying, I may not want to tell my husband that I'm voting for Kamala Harris. You have the opposite going down for the young voters where you have young men saying, I'm not sure I want to tell my girlfriend that I'm potentially voting for Trump, right?
That
So
is
there's
so
this interesting kind of piece that's going on that's usually the opposite of what happens for young voters, but we'll have to see tonight if they actually show up.
And from the university standpoint as well, too, is this something that will be studied in the future? After tonight is over and after all these numbers come in, is this something that people will be looking into?
Yes, right. It's something that we're all very interested in. Like I mentioned, the Institute of Politics at Harvard is kind of the leader in the country. So they do the best. They have a center that's really kind of looking specifically at the youth vote. So they will do a deeper dive afterwards to kind of really see all the kind of cuts to see whether this stuff is really happening or not tonight.
Wow.
Yeah.
And the podcast effect, I don't know if that's what they call it, that's what I'm calling it. We saw both major presidential candidates go on pretty high profile podcasts for this election cycle. Have we seen anything like that in previous presidential races?
So it's yes and no, right? So you've seen this in the sense that campaigns that are smart are going to go to where the voters are. So you've seen campaigns get in trouble in the past where it was like, I'm going to go to places where I think they should be. You should be reading these papers and you should be reading these magazines. The smart campaigns are going to go to where folks are actually getting their information. And so in that sense, this is just new tools to kind of carry that out. But there's no doubt that the explosion in the past couple cycles, it was blogs a while back, right? And kind of, but now to have these podcasts that really have such a, we talked about earlier, huge scale. And the question is, how does that kind of go hand in hand with also what we were seeing with a lot of the celebrity endorsements? Taylor Swift, Beyonce, all of those kind of things, Kid Rock on the Trump side. Do those things really matter or not? That's something we're going to kind of continue to look at as well.
Absolutely. I want to continue this conversation, but my producers are saying that we have got Representative John Lujan, the incumbent, and one of our close races here in Bexar County. We're going to take that live right now so you can kind of hear that Q&A.
You're up by a couple thousand, I think, almost 2,000 votes. So do you think that that's a good sign of things to come for tonight, or what do you think of that?
Well, I don't know, man. I walk in here and we have a 2,000 vote lead and everybody's cheering and they're all happy and I'm not because I'm looking at the numbers, right? So we can be happy right now. We might be sad in an hour or two, right? So I don't know, but I guess to start off, you always want to start off with a lead and we took off running and we got a couple thousand vote lead and let's see how that holds for the rest of the night. We'll find out.
You mentioned the contentiousness of this. A little bit of that comes on the school voucher part of this. Obviously, you voted in favor of them in the last legislative session. Governor Abbott backed you a lot of the reason because of that. Your opponent on the other side is staunchly against them. So why do you think that's such a contentious issue?
I think it's a contentious issue, and it's sad. I think it's made that way because they want to have a big fight, right? And that's not really the way we need to look at it. What we need to look at it is we're going to have, I'm all for parental choice. Now, what does that look like? That to me is the important thing. How do we rate the schools? How do we determine how the money follows the child? Those are the things that we're going to be working out. The ones that we had planned that didn't get passed, I think were solid proposals that we're going to fully fund our schools and still offer opportunity for parental choice. And I think we can do the two with our budget, but we have to be willing to invest those dollars, and I think we are. We're going to get those invested.
For you, does it depend on how the bill looks, or is it I'm going to vote yes on school choice?
No, mine is all about the bill because I want to make sure that when if you're going to have true parental choice, you've got to rate everything the same, whether it's public school, private school. If we start rating them and putting mandates on certain things and it's unfair, then then you're not having parental choice. I want it across the board fair and then let the parents choose and make the decision.
I know I'm asking you not to predict, but maybe let me talk to 10:30 p.m. Lujan that just won the election. If you win the election tonight, what does that mean for District 118?
You know, what it means for District 118 is that we're going to have a mandate for workforce development, economic development. That's big in our area. Our community, East Bexar County, Northeast, South, we're poised to grow. And we just got JCB here in South Bexar County. I worked with Governor Abbott's office on that. I worked with our county commissioner, Peter Sakai, our county judge, Peter Sakai, worked with him real hard on that, bringing that. Jobs and workforce readiness is what's really big, and that's the future of our area. The other big thing for me is public safety. The border really scares me. As an elected official, I was able to go to the border, and there's a lot of fear in my heart for what's going on, and we need to fix that.
And if in a couple of hours we see that Ms. Carranza has won and she will be taking over this seat, how will you look back at this campaign and at this journey as representative for District 118?
Number one, I'd be really proud. And not only that, right now in this interim, I have a lot of juvenile justice legislation, some transportation things, some vaping things, some fentanyl stuff that we're already writing up now since I'm the incumbent and I know what I know. We've got a lot of bills. I will package all that and I will take that to Carranza and I will work with her and show her what we have and hopefully she will carry the torch with that. I've always been like that. I'm not just saying that to be a nice guy. That's what I do and I would do that because it would benefit our community.
This is one of the tightest races, expected to be within a couple of hundred votes coming into today.
Right.
Why do you think it's that close?
Man, I hate to say negativity, but negativity plays a big factor in this. And when you start scaring people with lies and things, it's really, really sad. When I seen out in the polling side some people that said they didn't vote for me, and then it came out and we talked about it. Oh, I didn't know that. I thought you were, you wanted to force women to have babies that have been raped. I thought you wanted this. And that's sad, man. And I think that makes it closer. The other thing is this district is a 52% Democrat district. I don't go running, vote Republican. I go, man, how do we better our community? And everybody knows that. I work well with my colleagues across the aisle because I do what's right. I'm a man of faith, and I cry out to God for wisdom, and then I want to be able to be strong enough to do the wise things that we need to get done.
You've mentioned the hate that came along with the comments that you made on the radio about a hypothetical daughter and wanting her to be carry a baby to term no matter what. Why do you think those got taken maybe out of context or got kind of blown up on the other side? And what do you have to say about that?
Well, the sad thing is that's politics, but man, that's the sad thing. We shouldn't have it like that. Using the